it's Miss Allie and her friend Dragon from the library, here bringing you another story time from the library. I hope you're enjoying all the stories. Well, what book have I got today, you might ask? Well, before I tell you, you know what time it is. It's imagination time. So let's get our imagination fired up, because it's the best thing to have. If you're listening to a story, you need that imagination. So is it there? Let's rub our hands together. Can I feel it? Can I feel your imagination? And, imagine! Imagine, imagine, imagine a story. Imagine, imagine, imagine a book. Imagine, imagine, imagine a story. Open our eyes and let's have a look. So who have we got today? Why, it is Tyrannosaurus Drip. And this story is written by Julia Donaldson, and the illustrator is David Roberts. So Julia thought up the words and made the story, and David Roberts drew the pictures to illustrate the story. And this book is published by Macmillan, who are kindly letting me read this story to you today. So are we sitting comfortably? Are you sitting comfortably, Mr. Dragon? Good. So we shall begin. Oh, they almost look alike, don't you think? Oh, sorry. Right, so here we go. Here is the story of Tyrannosaurus Drip. In a swamp beside a river, where the land was thick with veg, lived a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs who roamed the water edge. And they hooted, "Up with rivers!" And they hooted, "Up with reeds!" And they hooted, "Up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds!" Now across the rushy river, on the hill the other side, lived a mean Tyrannosaurus with his grim and grisly bride. And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with war!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur!" But the two Tyrannosauruses, so grisly, mean and grim, couldn't catch the duck-billed dinosaurs because they couldn't swim. And they muttered, "Down with water!" And they muttered, "Down with wet!" And they muttered, "What a shame that bridges aren't invented yet!" Now a little compass, but for short we'll call her Comp, found a duck-bill egg and stole it from a nest beside the swamp. And she swam with it, and she ran with it, and murmured, "Clever me! And won't the baby Comps be thrilled with duck-billed egg for tea?" She dropped the egg in terror and went running for her life from the mean Tyrannosaurus and his grim and grisly wife. And the duck-billed egg went rolling, and at last it came to rest in, of all unlikely places, the Tyrannosaurus nest. Now the mother T had great big jaws and great enormous legs, but her brain was rather little, and she couldn't count her eggs. And she sang, "Hatch out, my little terrors, with your scaly little tails, and your spiky little toothies, and your scary little nails." Out hatched babies 1 and 2, as perfect as can be. But Mother T was horrified by baby number 3. She grumbled, "He looks weedy." And she grumbled, "He looks weak." And she grumbled, "What long arms! And his mouth is like a beak." "He just needs feeding up," said Dad, and gave the babes some meat. The first 2 gulped and guzzled, but the third refused to eat. And he said, "I'm really sorry." And he said, "I simply can't." And he said, "This meat looks horrible. I'd rather eat a plant." "A plant!" yelled Mum in horror. And Dad said, "Get a grip." His sisters found a name for him, Tyrannosaurus Drip. And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with war!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duckbill dinosaur!" Poor Tyrannosaurus Drip tried hard to sing along, but the others yelled, "You silly Drip! You've got the words all wrong." For he hooted, "Down with hunting!" And he hooted, "Down with war!" And he hooted, "Down with bellyfuls of duckbill dinosaur!" Drip's sisters grew big enough to hunt with Dad and Mum, but they turned on Drip and told him, "You're not fierce enough to come." And he cried, "They've gone without me." And he cried, "Alack-a-dack-a-day." And he cried, "This doesn't feel like home. I'm going to run away." So he ran off to the river, where he saw a lovely sight, a herd of duckbill dinosaurs, all hooting with delight. And they hooted, "Up with rivers!" And they hooted, "Up with reeds!" And they hooted, "Up with bellyfuls of juicy water reeds!" And he stood there on the bank. A sudden urge took hold of him. He jumped into the water and discovered he could swim. And the duckbills came to greet him by the rushy river's edge. They hooted, "Nice to see you, mate!" And they hooted, "Have some veg!" And Drip was delighted that they hadn't run away, ate bellyfuls of water weeds and played with them all day. He gazed into the river and asked them, "Who, oh who, is that creature in the water?" And they laughed and said, "It's you!" That night, the lightning crackled and a storm blew down a tree, and it fell across the rivers, and the tees cried out, "Yippee!" And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with war!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of juicy dinosaur!" Drip's sisters stepped onto the bridge, but then began to frown. For there in front of them stood Drip, who yelled, "Look out! Look down!" And they looked into the water, and they each let out a yelp, and one cried, "Water monster!" And the other one cried, "Help!" Their mother scolded nonsense and joined them on the tree. Then she looked into the water and exclaimed, "Good gracious me!" The 3 of them stood trembling, and Dad said, "Get a grip! You all of you are as drippy as Tyrannosaurus Drip." He strode out onto the bridge and scoffed, "I bet there's nothing there." And he and he looked into the water, and he jumped into the air. and how the duckbills hooted when he landed with a crash, and the tree bridge broke, and the 4 tyrannosauruses went splash! And spluttering and clinging to the branches of the tree, they went whooshing down a waterfall and all the way to sea. And the duckbills hooted happily, and they hooted hip, 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 hooray for the heroic one and only duckbill Drip. The end. Well, there you go. What a hero Tyrannosaurus Drip turned out to be. And he was quite brave, wasn't he? Now, does that remind you of a very famous fairy tale? I wonder if you know which story it's based on. Maybe you could draw me a picture of the story and let me know. Get your teacher to send it to me. Okay? So bye for now. Goodbye from me and goodbye from Dragon.